All right. So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining Cadre's webinar on early resolution, engaging families and stakeholders. I'm Melanie Reese, the director of Cadre, and we're excited to have you here today. Our presentation is another in our continuing series of valuable Cadre webinars. A few technical notes. Phone lines have been muted to minimize interruptions. At any point during the presentation, you can enter any questions or comments into the question box, not the chat box, on your control panel. Cadre staff will be monitoring comments and questions throughout the webinar. The PowerPoint for this webinar is available in the handout section of the control panel and on the Cadre website. We are extremely excited to share with you the innovative practices in dispute resolution from Georgia, Louisiana, and Washington State. Ann Ladd, Parris Taylor, and Scott Raub will each present what's going on in their respective states and in early dispute resolution. I'll introduce each of the presenters throughout the course of the webinar, and we'll save questions for the end and get through as many as time allows. First up, we have Ann Ladd. Ann is the Family Engagement Specialist for the Georgia Department of Education, Division for Special Education. Ms. Ladd successfully navigated special education services for her own son, who graduated in 2017. Her family's experience fuels her passion and informs her approach for family engagement. Ms. Ladd is a graduate of the University of Georgia and was a 2016-2017 Georgia LEND trainee at the Georgia State University. Previous to her current position, Ms. Ladd was a parent mentor in Georgia's largest school district for 8 years. Thank you so much for joining us, Ann.
Great, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here to talk about my favorite subject, engaging families, and particularly thinking about engaging families and stakeholders as an option for early resolution. I'm trying to advance my slide. Do I have that capacity? Hello?
Yeah, you should be able to mouse forward or use your keyboard to move forward.
Doesn't seem to be working, I'm sorry.
Okay, we can do it on this end.
Okay.
There we go.
All right. So thank you. So I just wanted to start with this overarching picture of what's happening in our state. This is Georgia's Systems for Continuous Improvement Framework. And we have, as you see, a whole child in the center, and we have identified 5 systems that we believe must be in place for sustained school district, excuse me, I'm so sorry. So we have these 5 systems that we believe must be in place for sustained school and district improvement. We believe that it's key to set those expectations from the top. And so family engagement is one of these systems, and family engagement is certainly our expectation in Georgia. And we strive to have authentic engagement, which blends that top-down and that bottom-up leadership. If you'll advance for me, I'm so sorry I can't do that. So I have a couple of learning targets today in this short time we have together, but I hope that you will be able to understand more about how family engagement can be used as an early resolution process, and particularly how in Georgia we utilize the parent-mentor partnership, and also where you can find more information about our parent-mentor partnership and also Georgia's model for authentic engagement called CAFE, Circle of Adults Focusing on Education. Okay, so there are multiple paths that families can take when they experience, oh, I'm sorry, it went ahead again. So this picture just really shows what a parent's experience with special education can be like. And there's multiple paths that families might take when they feel confusion or high emotions. And so we really believe that there's an opportunity here to help guide the path that they choose. We also, if you remember that graphic in the beginning, want to keep that child at the center. When it's apparent that the child is in the center, it helps build trust and partnership. Advance. Okay, so our state educational agency has the Systems for Continuous Improvement framework that values family engagement and has that whole child at the center. And we developed this so that we could align the work of all of our divisions in our department. So last year we began to think also more broadly about our dispute resolution in our Division for Special Education. And we expanded our dispute resolution unit to be called now Family Engagement and Dispute Resolution Unit. And yes, that name itself is a conversation starter. We've had some interesting conversations about that name, but really what we want to show is that we're providing a continuum of resources for Georgia families. And we hope to spend more energy in those first couple of squares in family engagement and dispute prevention and try to solve some of those things before we get to our more formal dispute resolution processes. But today, if you'll move forward, we are going to talk specifically about the parent-mentor partnership. I'm sorry. Here we go. And again, move forward. How we came to develop the parent-mentor partnership. So on the next slide, it talks about why family engagement. So this is that really compelling statement for me. When families are engaged, students achieve more, and that's regardless of socioeconomic status, ethnic racial background, or the parent's education level. This really provides that equal opportunity for all families to positively impact outcomes. And so when we begin to internalize this and believe that we value all families, we continue to build that trust and that partnership. Okay, so in Georgia, we thought about how we could make this happen. And we started by developing this initiative. And this initiative was designed to infuse family engagement in districts. And actually, the Georgia Parent-Mentor Partnership was really born out of our state advisory panel. We had a parent who was on the panel who had lived in Ohio and had worked as a parent mentor, a little bit different program, but certainly influenced and informed our program here. And she was a real advocate for getting this going here. So it is an initiative of our State Department, and it's partially funded with IDEA funds. It's an initiative that districts can choose to participate in, and they apply and receive grant funding. They hire their own parent mentor. So the parent mentor is an employee of the local school district. And so we ask that they select someone, or we really require that they select someone who is a parent of a child with a disability who has had an IEP or currently has an IEP. So you can imagine, though, back in 2002 when we started, this was different. This was a new concept to think about. Let's hire parents to work as parents in a school district. So we had some reluctant districts, but we were able to have 6 districts sign on to agree to be a pilot. And conversely, not only did we get some pushback from districts, but we had the advocacy community saying, hey, how can you expect these parents not to be biased if they're working for a school district? So we were both feeling it kind of from both sides, that pushback. But we continued on. We started our pilot. We continued to grow. And now in 2019, we have nearly 100 parent mentors in 92 school districts. Now, that's about half of our districts, but it represents a large percentage of our students because we cover all of our metropolitan districts in the Atlanta area and across the state. I wanted to share with you the mission of the Parent Mentor Partnership, which is to build effective family, school, and community partnership that lead to greater achievement for students, especially those with disabilities. So we believe that our students are general education students first. But when you're a student who needs specialized instruction or additional supports and services, those families and students experience some unique challenges. Our parent mentors are in a position where they have that lived experience of raising that child who has been or is currently a student with a disability. So while there are many people who have lots of knowledge and can be supportive to parents, we find it makes a difference when the mentor has sat on the parent side of the table, either figuratively or literally, and has worked to navigate the special education system for their own child, as well as make those connections and identify resources within their community. I do want to say that we do also work very closely with our Parent Training and Information Center here in Georgia, which is Georgia Parent to Parent of Georgia, and we do work collaboratively, so we don't think of this as an either or, but more like a both and really building the capacity and working back and forth. Because we are a partnership, we have collective knowledge that is really deep and wide, and these three women that you see here are parent mentors in the middle part of our state, and they just have a vast knowledge. One, the woman in the gold shirt, her son has been is about to graduate from an inclusive post-secondary program, and he will be living in the town where his school is, which is away from his family, and he has a job. So this was not necessarily what they thought maybe 10 years ago, but they're able now to share all those great things, like what it took to build that self-determination for him and what it took for the family to get ready to let him explore and grow, learn and grow and prosper and do well. So those are just really great stories and experiences to share. Another one of these women has a child with a rare medical condition, so she's able to share those strategies and how she's navigated. And in fact, I contacted her last week regarding some information I needed to share with the family. So that partnership is just really builds our capacity. So when you think back to that slide that was in the beginning with all those directional signs, these mentors can really make a difference when they get connected with families early on or just at critical moments in time. So it may be that they're working one-on-one with families, or it could be that they're training parents or providing technical assistance for teachers or administrators. We also work really hard to create that dual capacity. So we want to get parents ready to be engaged, but we also have to have schools ready to engage the families as well and to understand that value. Our parent mentors participate in professional learning within their district, and they're also invited to statewide professional learning as well. So in those early days, we were a little more folksy, and now we're really just part of the continuum of what's going on in those districts, and we're really being utilized as those influencers that we are in our communities and among families. If you'll go forward. So some of the things that parents do, in addition to building family engagement, is connecting families and teachers to resources and providing support to families. And I want to say something about this facilitate key stakeholder teams. We have several parent mentors who have convened the cafes, which are a circle of adults focusing on education. And these cafes have been stakeholder teams that have come together not just to check off the list, hey, we brought these stakeholders, got their input, we've done that, but really to solve those complex problems. And particularly, we convened these teams in the districts in our state who were working on our state systemic improvement plan around increasing graduation rates. So our mentors just have vast skill sets and a lot of influence in their communities as well. They develop workshops, they train teachers and administrators, and reluctantly they do a lot of data reporting, but we've learned a lot over the years and they're getting really good at that. They meet quarterly. We have 6 regions across our state, so they get together and share information, do additional professional learning, or bring in resources that are key in their communities. And also, a big listening is a big part of what they do too. Sometimes just being that listening ear is that thing that stops an escalation of a problem. So as I said, in the early days, we were really a rudimentary program. We just came together out of passion and enthusiasm. If you'll go back a slide, I think, or back a couple of slides, I'm sorry. And the evolution, as I said earlier, has been really significant. Parent mentors know who to reach out to internally. So if a family has a need, sometimes they can help them get to the right person in a district. And also if someone in the district has a need or needs information, they know who to reach out within other systems in the state as well. So that's an important part of what they do. And also messaging. So this is our website. And as I said, we were a pretty basic group. Now we have a website. We have a lot of tools and resources. But I screenshotted this page because it shows our multi-tier system of supports, which is our new initiative under our new SPDIG grant. So there's a lot of messaging that has to be going on now across the state, really at all levels, but certainly at the parent level. And so parent mentors are on that ground floor getting that information and helping share that. You'll also see that there's our parent satisfaction survey link is on here. Parent mentors are very active in recruiting, not recruiting, but spreading the word about the parent survey and making sure that we're getting input for our indicator 8. The arrow is pointing to the learning model, the video learning tools, and I just wanted to point that out because on that link we have 4 modules that we recorded that talk about our implementation manual of our CAFE stakeholder engagement model. So you may want to take some time to check that out. Okay, if you'll move forward. So this is how we do our approach to family engagement in Georgia. We start with the national standards, PTA standards for family school partnerships. And this is what we want to be doing all the time and being certain that we continue to do these 6, follow these 6 elements, these 6 standards for building family engagement. And we also, as we're doing our work, want to be thinking always about authentic engagement and how we're doing our work and how to go deeper with our work. So it's important to be sharing and informing, but can we go, a step further and also be hearing back and getting information from people? And then when do we take it that next step and begin collaborating? Who else needs to be at the table with us? Who else already cares about this work and is already doing this work? And then that transformation, when are we really blending that top-down and bottom-up leadership and collaborating and networking and informing? So we want to be thinking about this all the time so that we're not just stopping in one place where we could possibly go deeper and again solve some of those complex issues. Okay, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I did want to show you a couple of our how we collect data. So we were at a transition technical assistance national conference a few years ago, 5 years ago in fact. Me and another parent mentor were part of the team, and we sat and we listened to that, what I call Groundhog Day conversation, where we talk about families. Did they show up at the meeting? We tried it on Tuesday. Let's try it on Wednesday instead. They're not coming, and this is how we're talking about family engagement. And we looked at each other and said, we need to be reporting our data differently because we have great qualitative data and we have quantitative data. So we went back and developed these evidence to practice guides. We have, I think, 6 or 8. This one is themed by partnerships. We started with the frameworks around family engagement. We took the evidence from those frameworks. We selected an objective. We wrote SMART goals so our parent mentors didn't have to formulate a SMART goal. They could choose a SMART goal from the topic that was important to their district. And then those colored boxes in the center are vital behaviors. And that's what we want to train and teach our parents about so that they can develop these behaviors that we know will impact outcomes for students. And so if you'll move forward. This is our planning to implementation guide. So 4 times a year, the parent mentors report on their project, whatever topic they picked. Perhaps it was building partnerships, and they will have, by the end of the year, answered all of these 18 questions. They don't answer them in this format, but we created this so that they could kind of see where they were moving toward. And by the end of the year, they will all have answered these questions in regards to the work that they're doing in their district. And forward. And from the work over the last 4 years, I guess, we have extracted what has looked like has been working. So those best practices, and we've created these best practice guides around each of our evidence to practice sheets, so that if I'm starting something new, I can look and see what worked well for somebody in another part of the state. And so this way we're doing work, even though we're in different regions and different size communities, we can share what's working well and the barriers and the successes that we've had to really measure then the family engagement piece. So what are families doing? What are those behaviors? And what are the outcomes that they're seeing from their child? And when you take all of this back to dispute resolutions, what is it that people are upset about typically? And it's really because they want to see their child doing well. They want to see those positive outcomes. They want to understand what the future is going to hold for their child. So if we can engage them in that process and help them see the potential for their child, that really does take that energy that they're spending on being frustrated and moving it towards being more productive. And if you'll go forward. And so we want to, by building effective family and school and community partnerships, we want to help families move from that confusion and those high emotions to finding that path that leads to greater achievement for their child with a disability. So I have included just a couple of resources. One is our website, so you can go on and take a look and see what else you might want to learn about our project, and also the link to the CAFE implementation manual. All of that work is based on the work of Leading by Convening, and so we took that and we Georgiaized it, and we took it down to the district level instead of the statewide lens, but at the district level, and we're able to share that information in the implementation guide. So hopefully you can take a look at that as well. And I hope I've met my goals for you today, my expectations, that you know a little bit more about the parent-mentor partnership and how family engagement, whether it's a parent-mentor partnership or just engaging families, can lead to better outcomes for students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anne. Next, we're proud to bring you Parris Taylor. Parris is an attorney working for the Executive Council of the Louisiana Department of Education and is the coordinator for the department's dispute resolution program for students with exceptionalities. Mr. Taylor was a former IDEA administrative law judge and deputy general counsel with the state of Louisiana's Division of Administrative Law before joining the department. Attorney Taylor served as the founding chair, co-chair, and is currently a member of the Louisiana State Bar Association's Children Law Committee, and is also a member of the Louisiana State Bar Association's Legal Service for Persons with Disabilities Committee. Mr. Taylor graduated from Morgan State University in Baltimore and later graduated from the Southern University Law Center in Baton Rouge, where he has recently served as an adjunct professor teaching administrative law. Thank you so much for joining us, Parris.
Thank you for having me. And thank you also for putting this together. Cadre is a wealth of information and resource, a valuable resource that I take advantage of and recommend to others. And again, we appreciate you inviting us to participate and share information about Louisiana's dispute resolution processes. And one unique element of our options that we have, which is the informal complaint and early resolution process. Now, as my customary disclaimer, although I'm an attorney with the Department of Education, this is not intended to establish an attorney-client relationship. It's just sharing information. And it's not intended as legal advice. Now that I've got my disclaimer out of the way, as I go through this presentation, I want to just kind of review the major points. I'm going to first start off by talking about the department's general dispute resolution goals and available options. Then I'll delve deeper into the informal complaint laws and the implementation regulations. And finally, I will describe and overview the dispute resolution process for everyone. All right. The department generally, of course, as most state education agencies, has a mandate to monitor and supervise LEAs to make sure that they offer all students with disabilities a free and appropriate education in the least restrictive environment. Of course, that is not always as simple as it sounds, because whenever you're talking about parents and their kids, disagreements on what's best for them, even amongst parents, arise. So, of course, you can expect that parents and school districts won't always agree on the best way to address the educational needs of students with disabilities. So, Louisiana of LDE, we encourage parents and school districts to try to resolve special education disputes in the least adversarial manner possible. And I've included a definition when I say parents, I mean a lot of different, not only parents, but adult students, individuals, organizations, and the like. Now, the purpose and how and the end goal of LDE's dispute resolution options are to try to maintain two things. Number one, of course, to try to resolve disagreements. And secondly, it's important to try to preserve those relationships and improve and keep the communications line open between parents and school districts, because that is necessary to ensure student success. I've also listed some of the common areas of disputes. Now, I often tell folks that I'm a recovering administrative law judge. So, because I've been with the department for about close to 3 years now. So, in my experience as an ALJ, I saw that we often would come in to a school district, conduct a hearing. When I say I'll come in, we'll bring in a court reporter, attorneys will ride into town, and we'll try to hear this dispute. Then we'll leave. As an ALJ, I would issue a ruling by email, and I'm done. However, parents and schools are still left behind, and after we're gone, and they still have to try to work together, sometimes depending on the age of the student, for a decade or more. So trying to preserve the relationship and establish a long-term relationship of collaborative communication and dispute resolution is important for the long-term student success. Now, this slide, we have, of course, all of the customary and most known, commonly known dispute resolution options that are probably offered in most states. IEP facilitation, mediation, formal complaints, and of course, due process. And I've kind of listed them in what I consider from the least to most adversarial options available for dispute resolution. So next, I'm going to talk about and review some of the laws and regulations that were created to implement the informal complaint and early resolution process. Now, of course, the informal complaint and early resolution process is not required by IDA, but it is a creature of Louisiana law and our regulations. Now, the regulations, now first, the Louisiana Revised Statute, Title 17, Section 1941, is the state law that applies to children with disabilities, as well as giving our Board of Elementary and Secondary Education, BESE, the authority to create and promulgate regulations that school districts are to follow. And in Louisiana, we list those regulations in our administrative code, and we call them bulletins. And the bulletin that contains our regulations for informal complaint and ERP is Bulletin 1706, specifically in subsection 151C. We also include information about the informal complaint process in our procedural rights handbooks. Now, some of you might ask, well, okay, you got this accomplished through regulation. Is the regulation complex? Is it detailed? Is it intricate, multi-leveled, multifaceted? No, in fact, the opposite is true. On your screen now, you should see a copy of the language in Bulletin 1706, Section 151. And if you look at it, it's pretty simple and straightforward, actually. And it has three major parts. Number one, in Section 1, it's a description. It describes the process and the purpose. Of course, as we said, it's aligned with LDE's policy to try to promote parents and school districts to resolve disputes in the least adversarial manner, and we want it to be informal but systematic. I know that it seems like a misnomer. Section 2, the second part is describes how you initiate the informal complaint process, and the third section is the timeline and disposition. And a couple of things to note in Section 3 is that the early resolution period is 15 calendar days. Now, that's important because it provides the timeline that school districts are expected to try to resolve this. Again, the operative word is try. If it can't be resolved within 15 calendar days, that timeline can be extended by written agreement amongst the parties. Okay, next I will provide an overview of the dispute resolution process. Now, the primary benefits of the informal complaint process are about four, right? Number one, it is informal. There aren't a lot of there aren't a lot of forms necessary or hoops to jump through in order to initiate the process. It's fairly straightforward and simple. Third, it provides us an opportunity for a speedy resolution of those disputes. And fourth, it coincides with LDE's policy of trying to encourage parents and school districts to resolve disputes amongst themselves, because those types of resolutions seem to have a long-lasting effects, because that direct opportunity for direct engagement can be a non-adversarial manner of resolving the dispute, and it kind of almost gives the school and parents an opportunity to start working collaboratively. If they can start working walking down the path to collaborative dispute resolution, maybe they'll continue the process for any future disputes. Now, as far as the mandatory elements of the regulation, you can primarily divide them into four categories. Number one, our regulations require all LEAs to designate a local ERP representative. Now, in Louisiana, we have parishes, not counties. So, so either in your parish, special education director or supervisor or or maybe their designee, depending on the size of the parish, right? In most parishes, the ERP representative, especially some of the smaller parishes, is the SPED director or the supervisor. However, in some of your more populated parishes, your larger parishes with larger school districts, there could be a specific designee who reports to the special education director or the superintendent is identified as the ERP representative. The second mandatory element of the regulation for LEAs is that they have to ensure the LDE knows that that representative's name and contact information, and they should also take steps to make sure that that information is available to the public and the parents in their school district. Third, they need to develop a process that resolves the informal complaints that attempts to resolve the formal complaints within 15 calendar days after the school district receives it, unless of course the parties agree to an extension. Now, when I'm conducting presentations at parent assistance centers or for other community stakeholders, and in talking to them about the informal complaint process and that timeline, one of the things I point out to them is try to be reasonable. That when considering whether to grant an extension, although this does provide a opportunity to resolve the dispute quickly, sometimes things might take more time. The example I often use is perhaps there's some technology that would resolve the dispute, but it's not something you can go pull off the shelf at Walmart or Best Buy or order off Amazon. You might have to it might take more than 15 days for it to be ordered, paid for, and delivered. But if a school district says we're ordering it, it's going to take 21 days to get here or whatever, then the parent and the school district can enter into a written agreement to extend the resolution period. And finally, the fourth element is if the parties are unable to resolve the dispute, the last mandatory element of the regulations for LEAs is that they have to not only document their efforts and some sort of communication to the parent, but included in that, it should inform the parent about the other special education dispute resolution options. Again, that's in the case that that resolution is not possible. Now, initiating, there are two basic entry portals for starting the informal complaint process. Now, the parent can contact the LEA directly to get the ERP's representative information, or hopefully the school district maybe has it posted on their website, or they can also contact LDE to ask and tell us what school district they're part of, and then we can take their information and forward it to that LEA's ERP representative. Now, another element to this ERP process that's important to remember is that this process is voluntary, right? The parent can engage ERP process and halfway through it decide to withdraw from it and pursue any other options available, legal options available under the law. So again, it's not a mandatory requirement, but it's an opportunity for parents and school districts to work voluntarily and collaboratively in order to resolve the dispute. So next, during this ERP process, what's LDE's active role? None, actually, and that is by design. It's included in the regulation in subsection D of section 151. It specifically states that LDE should have a hands-off approach, at least for that initial 15-day period. We stay out the way and basically give them an opportunity to to resolve the problem amongst themselves. However, our regulation specifically state that our role is receive any concerns or inquiry from the parents, document it, of course, relaying that inquiry and to the LEAs, and then, of course, providing the parents with the ERP representative contact information so that they can follow up and contact that person directly. Now, when parents contact the ERP representative, there are a couple different things. They have to be told about the 15-day window, and it gives them, again, the ERP representative and the parent can attempt to resolve the dispute. Now, one of the benefits of using the informal complaint process that when I'm speaking to parents, I tell them that a lot of times it gives them an opportunity to speak to someone who's not inside their school building where that their child attends, right? Because that gives them an opportunity for a third person, a decision maker, to kind of intervene and attempt to resolve the dispute if they weren't getting any traction towards resolution inside the school building. Now, when a parent contacts LDE and either through an inquiry or wants to file an official informal complaint, we have an ERP intake coordinator who will relay that information to the LEA's ERP representative, and usually they usually complete that task within 2 calendar days by sending them an email, and that ERP notification email has a brief neutral description about the informal complaint. If the parent sent some documents on attachment, we would forward it to the ERP representative. It has the timelines for resolution and also include the parent's contact information in the notification to the ERP representative. Again, it's just a summary, and we take measured efforts, try to not add any additional information or to it that reflects any position on what the parent's allegations are or the nature of that dispute. Now, again, these are the major components of the informal complaint and ERP regulations. The first and the last are what I consider to be the major components. Again, you have to have some sort of written procedures that allow a school district and a parent to attempt to engage informal complaint process and ERP and try to resolve it within 15 days, and school districts are expected to document the results. All that documentation related to the ERP process should be kept on site and subject to inspection by our compliance monitors, who can come in, and while they're reviewing the special education records and procedures for school districts, one of the things they will also check is not only their regulations, but also make sure that they're keeping the documentation to show that they're following the timelines and making this process available to parents. And finally, the LEAs must continually update any changes in ERP representatives. You have to keep LDE informed of those. And we have a designated email address for our ERP intake coordinator to send those updates to. So they just have to, if there's a change, someone gets promoted or moves on, the next person, they need to make sure we always stay updated with the most current information. And that sums it up. Our ERP process, again, it's fairly straightforward, simple, direct. It is informal, but it also, again, gives the parent and the school district an opportunity to try to work through the problem collaboratively. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much for the kind words, Parris, and the wealth of information. Our final presenter today is Scott Raub. Scott is the Special Education Parent and Community Liaison for the State of Washington Office of Superintendent of Public Instruction. He serves as a resource for information about the special education process and dispute resolution options to students, families, educators, and community members throughout the state. His past professional experience includes working in a variety of educational and nonprofit settings as both a counselor and an attorney. His interest is in the intersection between education and civil rights, and that's what eventually led him to focus on his work on the rights of adults and students with disabilities. Scott earned his law degree from the Washington College of Law at American University and is a member of the California State Bar. He has a bachelor's degree in political science and one in communication studies, and a master's degree in counseling psychology from the University of San Diego. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate the invitation to be a part of this, and I'm really grateful for everyone who's participating and listening to what we do. I'm going to try to explain as best I can kind of how we kind of approach my role within this office, and kind of some of the benefits and hopefully opportunities we see from it. A little bit briefly just about the background of how I guess I came to be. My position was created back in 2005. That's before I started in the role. It was originally conceived of as an ombudsman at the time, but that sort of title over time I think generally was confusing to people. Didn't necessarily know what it meant just by hearing it, and didn't really accurately convey what I tried to do or what my role became within our office. And there's an air of formality, I guess, to the title ombudsman for those who do know about it or are familiar with that title. And it kind of misnomer in the sense that I don't have any formal authority or role within the dispute to resolve the dispute process. And we have a separate office in our state which uses the same title. So it led to a little bit of confusion, and that's what caused us to redefine my role, or the title at least, to the parent and community liaison. It was a little bit more understandable, I think, to the general public as to what I do or what I can do. And it's a little more expansive in terms of my ability to represent the agency, represent the priorities of special ed, and I can be a liaison in many different ways to many different people. And so we use the term parent, as I already mentioned, pretty deliberately because there's a specific definition within IDEA for what a parent means, and that obviously extends more broadly to all family members and adult students. There's only one of me in the state currently, and I report directly to the assistant superintendent within our state superintendent's office. So kind of briefly, I guess, to kind of sum up what my role does, I tried to divide it up for the purposes of this talk is to sort of three kind of areas, and they're kind of overlapping functions. I mean, first and foremost, I engage and serve as really the primary contact for families or any community advocates who have questions. I obviously don't answer all questions that come into the state office, and it's not always a question about disputes. It's sometimes more generally, as we'll talk about, just how to navigate the process. My role kind of sits in the middle of a lot of conversations between people both internally and externally within our agency and throughout our state. So there's a communication kind of function, and overall my perspective or what I hear, I try to use that for systems improvement and advocacy, as I'll mention. So first and foremost, one of my primary roles is the sort of engagement with families. And if there's a question that comes into our office about how to use a dispute process, or how to even just special ed even works, where do I start if I'm a family who's new to special ed, even just navigating the whole bureaucracy of a school district, those kind of questions will come into me. So I try to serve as that sort of primary contact for families who might need a little more direction. I offer the sort of guidance necessary to get through the process, understand the process kind of on as a big picture level, and also direct families to kind of resources either within their district or within the community at large that could also be a little more, have direct contact with them on a day-to-day basis. If there are families though who have a sort of interest in formal dispute options or who have a need to understand what their procedural safeguards are, I try to be as well versed in those as possible, and I offer guidance on how each of those processes work so that families are fully informed about what exactly it means to file a complaint, go to due process hearings, or other options like mediation or facilitation in our state that are available. And I can also review the procedural safeguards to know that within the process, there are certain elements that they can rely upon to kind of resolve a disagreement or dispute. And with that, that kind of speaks broadly to this idea of engagement being something where, in my personal work, try to build up the capacity of families to really be participants in the process, to have the knowledge necessary to feel like they're on equal footing with school administrators, to understand how to have a productive conversation, who to talk to, what you might want to say. If they understand the process as a whole, then perhaps could work through any disagreement or dispute without necessarily needing a formal process. Some examples, recently this comes up frequently, that many of you might be familiar with, say, when a student needs to be reevaluated. What are the steps in those process, or the eligibility process? What are those kind of steps? Or if disciplinary measures come up, how do those processes work? If parents feel like they're on equal footing or they know who to talk to, then there may be a better opportunity for resolution. And kind of as needed, what I'll do in the engagement part of it is make sure that I can put families in touch with administrators as needed. The primary role is to try to really empower families to have that connection in the relationship. But obviously there may be moments when if English is not the first language of the primary language for a family, sometimes it's ensuring that there's a contact with someone in a district who can work with that family more effectively, or try to contact an administrator to kind of restate what my understanding of an issue might be so that we can better identify how to support the family or try to navigate the process. And really, as doing sort of an assessment based on what is the family's needs, you can try to get them connected to the right people. And so there is sort of a measure of directing traffic with regard to the communication flow. And within all that, my other kind of roles are to provide training and information to parent groups throughout our state or community groups so that they understand what's available, how the process works, and if there's anything new that's going on in our state with regard to new regulations, laws, or trends or policies. I will frequently get out there in the community to speak more broadly to groups of families or parents as invited, so that there's a better understanding of how the overall system works. A good summary, or just one of the resources we have on our website, is just a section on guidance for families broadly. So this is kind of a tool I actually use, and I try to write or keep this updated where I'll just refer families to information that they can find on our website to kind of complement the conversations that we have in person. One of the things that is important to kind of point out that sometimes comes up in my role is that I do not attend IEP meetings as much as I get invited to them. I'm not the investigator when there is a complaint, so sometimes to be very clear in my role if that's not the case. And specifically, I don't offer legal advice, but I will try to explain what the regulations mean in terms of a process, or what the state or our office's policy is with regard to a regulation, on how we interpret it and enforce it, so that families can understand what that might look like in practice, and have conversations with their district administrators and school staff with regard to their specific student. And as I talked about, I'll assist in communication as necessary between parents and school districts to try to facilitate a resolution, because we do want to try to prevent it at the disputes at the lowest level possible. And that's always tricky sometimes because in my role, I try to stay as neutral as possible and really advocate for using the system for a resolution, if anything, but not advocate for one specific party or try to be an apologist for what school districts are doing. So there's an element of diplomacy that's needed with regard to trying to balance the two needs of families and school districts with regard to the process, and really try to focus on using the process and the processes and the elements available in the process to come to a resolution. Some of the opportunities that really come from this, I guess the outcomes we try to see, it's not an easy thing to exactly measure, but I do try to track who I'm in contact with and what kind of issues come up. In that regard, I can still have kind of my ear to the ground understanding of what kind of trends or themes are popping up, at least they're coming to us at the state level. And my specific role is not to prevent complaints specifically from happening, but to actually inform families about what does it mean to file a complaint if they have one, and what does that process look like prior to actually making the complaint. And sort of a rough number in the sense of annually, if we were to look at the number of complaints that get filed, citizen complaints within our state, only a third to less than half at the most of those complaints have had contact with me prior to making that complaint. So there isn't anything specifically, I guess, tied to what I do in terms of complaint prevention. But I'm also talking about mediation, and we've seen a lot of a rise in that in our state. And also if parents are going through due process hearing, they can come to me with information generally about this is what you expect procedurally from a due process hearing. And they can understand that, you know, what happens once a due process hearing starts is that the ALJs will take over. And so in my sort of ability to track what I'm doing and put it into some kind of measurement, I try to have a measure of where if I'm having contact with a family, keeping track of what kind of issues are coming up or they're bringing up. And it averages out to about 800 kind of unique phone calls or contacts with families, in the sense of like one family contacted me. We may talk for multiple times, but at least that's one unique family that's had contact, or one unique community advocate who's had contact with me. And oftentimes it involves more than one phone calls, at least, you know, as the numbers that, you know, kind of roughly show, at least 1/4 or 1/5 of them, I'm having more than one phone call or email with them. And then, yes, about a fifth of callers have contacted me from one academic year to the next. So we can kind of see there is some consistency happening, or at least there is some success with using me as a resource in the office. And this slide is really an example of what I can kind of do, since I've been in this role for a little over 6 years now, that I can actually kind of see broadly, at least from my tracking system, I can have a conversation about, well, what are most of the phone calls about? Where are the areas where we're having questions come up? As I mentioned, what are the trends? What's sort of happening in terms of the conversations that are going on from the family perspective? And I can use that to kind of overlap with some of the other functions that I mentioned in terms of bringing the parent perspective to conversations we have in our state for policy making, or sort of perhaps improving some of the systems that we use to resolve disputes. So the tie-in here is one of my jobs is to really end up being someone who's in the sort of center of the communication between both folks within our agency and other sort of bureaucratic systems or administrative offices within our state or school districts. And so in that regard, I can represent the parent concerns when I'm having conversations with other offices, say within the state superintendent's office. So if we're talking with some recent examples, we have an equity and civil rights office. So we have obviously a very close relationship with them. Student support services, so there's issues regarding student safety or attendance needs. Things like that I'm able to kind of be someone who would represent, at least from the families that I hear from, here's the special ed perspective, or here's how different policy decisions or information might be affecting students who are eligible or families who are with a student eligible for special ed. And in some regards, students who are in special education, they don't only have an issue with special ed. And so that's where sometimes I am the link to making sure that a family is in touch with another office within our agency. If, for example, it's some sort of highly talented or gifted program they need to have a contact with, I can be the link or serve as that sort of single point of contact to put them in touch with someone within our agency who has the right expertise to actually answer a question. And my role, as I said, sort of extends out to others within our state. So our state is broken up into different sort of regional support districts, and so they're called ESDs or Educational Service Districts. And I can be sort of a regional contact for one of those, and for different special ed administrators throughout our state. So I talk to sort of anybody who really has a question, and if there's, like I said, there's a family who has concerns about communicating with someone, I can usually make the phone call or try to identify how the family can navigate within a district who's the right person to talk to. And because of kind of what I do, I also try to get out there and communicate more broadly to professionals within our state and with any regional conferences as well with regard to serving students in special education. You know, recently, obviously, we did one within our state where we were talking about alternative learning programs in our state, which is online learning or sort of non-traditional arrangements for learning. And we can bring the perspective of how would a student eligible for special ed be served in a different kind of context. And so given my experience and contact with families, we can represent how administrators in those programs might navigate or engage families who are involved in those. Being at the center of sort of communication with the sort of the external public allows me to also have ongoing contact with our mediators, our facilitators, our judges, as is sort of mentioned, and we work as well pretty closely with our Parent Training Information Center. They're highly valuable, and I think there's an opportunity to align what these different groups are doing with regard to one overall system, have conversations about where we can improve, or conversations about what we can do or expect with regard to trends that we're hearing, and have sort of consistent messaging so that they know what the state's perspective is, and then have it go out to the community members that they have contact with or the parents that they're having contact with. This slide is just sort of a brief example of kind of what happens. I mean, there's screenshots of some of the publications where I might have sat in on and had conversations with those different agencies within different offices within our agency who are developing guidance more broadly on a different topic where there's a special education perspective brought to the table, and representing sort of this big chart. This is our agency-wide sort of priorities with regard for students who are receiving special ed services. My role is to kind of represent the parent perspective, or bring this also information out to parents and community members so that they can have as much a vested interest in what we are doing as a state agency, as well as administrators and folks who work in the districts. And that's sort of my last tie-in to where this is about opportunities to advocate for systems change or improvements as necessary. I get to work very closely with all of the sort of talented people in our office who do the monitoring and system improvement kind of actions, and be a part of those conversations with regard to what are the policy positions of our office when it comes to expectations about how IEPs are going to be developed and the compliance elements that we're looking for. Even if for instance, we had an example of a district who may have been at sort of a highest level of intervention and need for intervention. In the past, I've been able to kind of work hand in hand with our sort of monitoring and system improvement kind of team to where I could play a role in working with a district specifically to overhaul their systems and kind of understand how parents might interact with what their processes might be. And so there's that kind of ongoing conversation with regard to policy that can happen, whether it be other examples in our state, whether it be with sort of statewide assessments that are going on, and the provision of services, or progress reporting and interpreting kind of recent Andrew F. decision. We had that sort of opportunity to write things and have sort of guidance or tips that come out from our office that talk about systems and how we're going to practice within our state. And I've made some frequent appearances to our State Education Advisory Council, our SEAC, to have that sort of two-way conversation, to where, again, it's sort of bringing the parent perspective, or this is the trends that I'm hearing on the ground, to everyone's knowledge. And more recently, I've been serving as the primary contact for our non-public agencies, or basically our private schools who are serving students eligible for special ed in our state. Because again, there's having that kind of relationship, or at least one person who can be a contact in our office, again, who can have that kind of overall systems perspective with regard to how does our families interact with private schools, and how do districts use non-public agencies to provide FAPE to students. And luckily, I think with my interest and my background, I'm able to be involved in rewriting some of the state regulations, bringing in kind of a parent perspective or community perspective with regard to how does the system work. Probably the most recent example in our state had to do when a couple years back we rewrote the laws around the use of restraints or seclusion and isolation in our state. And so being able to kind of have a role or a stake in what those regulations say, and writing them in a way that keeps a parent perspective in mind, or the community's perspective in mind, based on what I'm hearing. And this extends not only to within our state regulations for special education, but more broadly if we are rewriting rules within our agency. I mean, that's happened recently when we've revised discipline rules more broadly that apply to all students, or even attendance regulations or regulations relating to transferring from districts. Those are examples of how a special ed perspective can be brought to the table for how those regulations might have an impact on the families that our office serves. And from time to time, there have been requests for me to also speak to state legislators about what I do, so they have that kind of perspective. And vice versa, state legislators will refer constituents to me who may have questions through our sort of general process of having an intake. If there's a question about how to work through the process, we can serve state legislators and their constituents that way. This is just a brief sort of picture about kind of the examples that I talked about, you know, rewriting the rules and regulations, and allows also myself to have the ability to create kind of guidance documents that can be used both in a friendly way for families as well as for school district administrators and staff and community members. So there's an overall kind of systems perspective, and try to make it work more effectively for everybody. And my role is described specifically on our website. So if there's ever kind of a deeper dive into what kind of we do in our state and how I function, there's always a way to contact me this way on our website. So thank you for having me and for listening.
Thank you so much, Scott and Parris and Ann. We really appreciate your time. We may have time for one question. Could you open up the questions for me? This is for Parris. How long has ERP been in place in Louisiana, and has there been any change in the formal dispute resolution activity in the state since its initiation?
ERP has been a part of our regulation since 2008. And as far as any changes in the process, no, it's just it's an add-on. We consider it an add-on. So no.
And this question is for Ann. Ann, you mentioned some pushback from both school and advocacy groups in the early days. Did such potential conflicts actually occur? And if so, how'd you overcome them?
Well, it's been 17 years, and so there was a little this was before Facebook, fortunately. So I think we just continued to work through it and stayed the course, and really just developed our professionalism, and we kind of moved past that. And I think because it was new and unknown, but I think we are trusted now as a good source.
Great, thank you. And a final question. Are you aware of any informal process to check out what might be legitimate concerns of parents rather than just deferring it back to districts? That's for Scott.
I think the informal process might just be talking to me, in the sense that I can take those kind of concerns and, like I said, I kind of track a lot of what the conversations are that come into me. And so that's how I can bring that perspective to folks within our office and bring it to districts more broadly, in the terms of I start to have a shape or a hand in shaping what are the conversations or guidance materials that come out from our office to address sort of common issues that are coming up with regard to kind of informal complaints. But there isn't anything kind of formally structured, and I think that's one of the opportunities for growth that we're still looking at as a state, is how can we continue to create more of those informal, I guess, opportunities.
Great, thank you. Well, in wrapping this all up, thank you so much for joining us today. It is really important to us that we get your feedback from this webinar. So if you would, please click on the link in the chat box to fill out a brief SurveyMonkey to evaluate today's webinar. We would greatly appreciate it. And just as a bonus, if you're interested in learning about other early dispute resolution practices, Cadre has curated a wide variety from across the nation. Go to our website and click on the Cadre Continuum. You'll see practice areas listed, and you can click on those to open up a world of innovative activities happening around the world, around the United States. Our next webinar is Let's Work Together, Building Local Capacity with Cadre's Online Learning Resources, and that will be held May 14th, and we hope to see you there. Thanks again for joining us, and we look forward to next time.